think it started in January of '66, and then it peaked. The show was August 18th, 1966. And up to that point in time, my dad and Uncle Frank had just been doing shows at the Carousel. Not big A-list entertainers at the time, but B-list entertainers, guys that, the rock and roll movement was just kind of coming into its own around 1965. At least they got their names, my dad and Uncle Frank got their names out there, and they were known as the rock and roll guys in Boston. If you were going to come to Boston and do a show, you would talk to my dad and Uncle Frank. In 1966, they weren't really, my dad had an accounting business at the same time, and that was his primary moneymaker, and he was kind of in the theater deal just, kind of for the fun of it, not really. So I guess what happened was Uncle Frank befriended this guy from Columbia Records. He was the guy, he produced a concert called Concert for Bangladesh by George Harrison produced. There was a famine or a flood or something in the early 70s in Bangladesh. And so all these famous rock and rollers got together and put on a benefit for that. That was, I think, the very first, kind of rock and roll for relief of some sort of disaster. Frank was in New York City talking with this guy from Columbia, and one of the Beatles, one of the guys, it was the guy who produced the Beatles show at Shea Stadium right around the same time as the Suffolk Downs show. And he said, the Beatles are coming to Boston. Why don't you guys do the show? And Frank's like, yeah, we'll try. He talked to my father, let's do it. Yeah. Let's try to do it. Okay, you got 50,000 cash. You need to put up 50,000 cash. We'll sign a contract to get the contract, and the day of the show, you owe him another 50 grand. So it was the most expensive act ever, by far the most expensive act ever in the history of the planet. Up until that point, the largest was a Barbra Streisand of all people in Connecticut. She did a show, and it was like, $70,000. But the Beatles were 100 grand, and that was cost prohibitive. Who can do it? So my dad was good with money, and he was pretty creative. He was a problem solver. So they were broke. I mean, they didn't have that kind of cash. So my dad came up with this idea where their ticket agent for the Carousel, one of their big the guys they sold the tickets through, he knew that this guy had money, and so he made a deal with him and said, I'll give you exclusive rights to sell the Beatles tickets for the first 3 days that the tickets are on sale, and anybody that wants to buy a ticket has to go through you. So you make your commission 50 cents or $1, whatever it is, on every single ticket. I got 60,000 tickets I printed. That's good money back then for whatever it is. And I'll pay you back. And you get because you got the 50,000 cash from the tickets, you can take your money back that way. So the guy agreed. Fronted my dad the 50 grand. They got the contract, and he said, okay, let's find a place. Let's find a place for them to play now. So we got, the Beatles had played the Boston Garden in 1964. The Garden only seats 14,000. Maybe another 1,000 or so on the floor. So you had 15 grand. So, but you'd have to sell 7 $7 tickets just to break even.
Right.
And that was a lot of money back then, I guess. So, okay, they needed a place with more seats. Dad and Frank, they used to go to Suffolk Downs racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
They'd take off work and they loved the horses. They just loved the horses. My dad was a terrible gambler, but he liked horses. Back then, they didn't have a lot of options for sports.
Yeah.
And this was something that was cheap. It cost $1 for entry, and so they used to do that a lot. My dad just loved the horses. So, and they got to know the woman who was I guess she was the assistant to the manager or the owner or whatever. And her name was Bea Furlong.
Okay.
Furlong. You know what a furlong is? Furlong is in racing. It is, I believe it's a lap around the track.
Oh.
In horse racing.
Okay.
So here's a woman named Furlong who works at a horse track. So they got to know her. So they called her up and said, hey, can you arrange a meeting with us for the owner of the track or the track manager? So she did. And here's the thing. Now, in baseball, there's this guy who owned a baseball team, who was a big baseball team owner in like the 30s, 40s, 50s. And he owned this team called the St. Louis Browns, which became the Baltimore Orioles, whatever. So he was crazy. He was like a ringmaster for a circus. So he had this idea where he would make promotions for the games. Like during the Depression, he would give away live chickens to everybody that came in. And he would just do all these crazy things. Like he would have matinees. He would put on shows before the baseball game.
I love it.
For the little kids and everything. He was nuts. His name was Bill Veck. And the most famous thing he ever did. One day he sent a midget up to bat.
Okay.
And how are you going to pitch to a midget? His strike zone is like this. So he walked.
Okay.
And they outlawed it after that.
Okay.
But it was just such a big, scandal when he did that. And this guy didn't care. He didn't care about anything. If he angered people or pissed off the other owner. He sold tickets and during the Depression, and his players loved him, and that's all he cared about.
Yeah.
So he owned that team, and they forced him out because the other owners didn't like the way he was doing business.
Okay.
I think one of the things that he did was he made sure that his players were getting more money. So it would be attractive for players to come to his team, but they didn't have free agency back then, so the other owners didn't like this guy. They said, hey, you're raising the price, you're stirring up trouble with the labor here. And he was one of the first owners to have a black guy on his team. He didn't really care what anybody else thought. And he was an ex-Marine. Okay. And Uncle Frank was an ex-Marine. So, that was something they had in common. And the other thing was this guy, Bill Veck, he lost his leg in the war, so he had a peg leg. So he had something right below his knee was like a little cup with the peg leg on it. Yep. So he would walk around with that. When you be having a meeting or a conversation with him, he'd take his leg off, he'd light up a smoke, and he'd use his peg leg as an ashtray. He was famous for doing that.
Okay, that's great.
So he set up a meeting. So B. Furlong sets up a meeting with Bill Veck, of all people. And Bill Veck didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what the subject of the meeting was. It was just, I got a couple of guys. So Frank and my dad went to the racetrack to meet with, because there's a big, cafeteria, whatever, lunch place where you can eat and watch the races while you're eating. So before they went up to meet him, they played the Daily Double and they won.
That's
So
great.
my dad was thinking, oh, this is going to be a good day. We're
Right,
going to have a
right.
good day with this guy. So they go up and they meet with Bill Veck, and and Bill Veck says, hey, I like what you guys want to do. I think it's really, you're just like, you remind me of me, being creative. You
Yeah.
want to rent the track. It's our off season. Okay, we're not running races right now. And if you guys put on a show, that's a good way for me to get my labor, some work during the off season. So if I make a deal with you, you got to agree to use my union guys as your labor.
Yep.
So my dad says, okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm gonna put on a show here. Can we put on a concert? And Bill Vick says, yeah. How about $1,000? So they go, okay, yeah. So they made a deal with Bill Veck to rent Suffolk Downs, August 18th,
That's crazy.
for $1,000. So now they have their place. So now they can start selling the tickets.
Yep.
So they put an ad in the Boston Globe. My dad said he put out maybe 1 or 2 ads. And that's it. Now,
Don't need much for the Beatles.
you don't, like a lot of other guys, a lot of the other concert promoters used to put out posters. And those posters are worth a fortune if you can find them. My dad was too cheap to do that. Instead, he put the ads in the Globe, and that was the only place. But once he put the ad in the Globe, it sold out in like 3 days. Once he put the ad out in the Globe, Bill Veck found out who was playing at the concert.
Right.
So my
no.
dad walked into his accounting office the morning, after the weekend, I guess, when the ad came out, and he has a secretary named Jane, and he walks into the office, and Jane goes, oh my God, there was a guy on the phone looking for you. He was furious. He goes, oh yeah, I was expecting a call.
Oh, no.
And so it was Bill Veck. So he calls him back, and he goes, and Bill Veck is screaming at him, how come you didn't tell me it was the Beatles?
Beatles.
And my dad said, hey, you never asked.
Oh no.
You never thought to ask who was
Right?
the concert. So
Absolutely.
this guy, Bill Veck, there's a silence, and then my dad said he starts roaring in laughter, and after he realized what happened, he goes, you just conned a con man. And
Love
he
it.
goes, can I have 4 tickets to the show? And my dad said, oh, of course.
Yes.
So he gave me 4 tickets. So that was the Bill Veck. That's how they got the show. And
I love that.
So they had a great conversation, I guess, when they were up there, especially Bill Veck and Frank. But I think Bill Veck really liked what they were doing, young entrepreneurs, and just doing whatever it takes. They didn't care, about convention or anything. They'll do whatever it takes to put the show on, and the show must go on, and I think he really liked that.